Okay, it's now 9 o'clock. I would like to call to order the October 7th, 2020 meeting of the TPA Technical Advisory Committee pursuant of the Governor's Executive Order number 20-69, the TPA Operating Procedure Section 6.2, and the TPA Emergency Order number 2020-04. The Palm Beach TPA is conducting this meeting virtually using Zoom webinar platform. The TPA selected this platform because it does not require a public purchase or download or any additional software or equipment to attend this meeting. Aside from the Zoom webinar platform that participant will be using to attend remotely, the public will have no discerning differences on their ability to watch the meeting from that someone physically attending the meeting. Instructions to join the virtual meeting as well as contact information for the TPA staff member is to assist you are provided on the published meeting agenda. Please note that although some members of the TAC are attending the meeting in person, committee members will be appearing at today's meeting remotely, either via webcam or telephone. Additionally, scheduled presenters of the TAC liaison or CAC liaison will also be appearing via webcam telephone. Before we begin, I will summarize our public comments procedure for the virtual meeting. Written documents and questions can be submitted online at the website provided in the agenda. Verbal comments can also be made live through Zoom webinar platform. When you wish to be recognized, please use the raise hand function with the Zoom platform and then wait to be recognized by the chair and unmute by the meeting host. Lastly, an in-person visitor may submit a comment card available at the welcome table. Okay, so at this time, please have roll call, please.
Will Hicks. I just want to make sure I do still have some people join virtually through attendees only. Okay, so Moderson Alter.
Yes.
Steve Anderson.
Anna Bielawska for Steve Anderson.
Terrence Bailey.
Here.
Jim Bell.
Sorry, here.
Jamie Brown. Lorraine Cargill. Natalie Crowley.
Here.
Wen Dang.
Here.
Brian Davis.
Present.
Kim Delaney.
Here.
Oscar Smith.
No, I got a TPA meeting.
Okay, sorry, if you can mute on your end if you're not saying you're here or not. And I believe I had CJ is here for Tom. Can you just confirm verbally, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Alex Hansen.
Here.
Aaron Hoffman. Kara Irwin Ferris.
Here.
Andrew Mack.
Mike Rum for Andrew.
Meher Mansour.
Here.
Christopher Marsh.
Here.
Michael Odell.
Here.
Richard Pereira. Richard Reed.
Here.
Kim Glass Castro for Rich Reed.
Maria Tahara.
Here.
Penny Wilson. John Crane.
Here.
Rappaport, Madam Chair.
Okay, moving on to the next item. Are there any requested modifications to the agenda at this time? Okay, seeing none. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes? Okay, if not, can I have a motion?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for this meeting. This is Alex.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, Alex motion, Kara second. Any discussion? So all those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Nay? Okay, motion carries. So we're moving on to general public comments at this time. Are there any general public comments received?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. Then next item is comment from the chair. I don't have any comments. So we are going to move to the TAC liaison report. So I'd like to invite Andrew.
I'm sorry, we did readjust the agenda, so now we have moved member comments up as well with comments from the chair. So if there's any member comments.
So right now I'd like to invite Andrew to present.
All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to go through the liaison report. I'm actually going to go through it rather quickly. There's a lot of items on the liaison report this month. If you guys have any questions about it afterwards, we provide this on our website under the tax site, so you can always see it there. The first one I actually want to mention is not on this report, and this was one that we put on the board liaison report last month, but in our fiscal year 2021 strategic plan, the TPA directed staff to pursue distinguished workplace designations. This past month, we applied for and were awarded a bicycle-friendly business silver designation by the League of American Bicyclists. So we're excited to provide a bicycle-friendly workplace for employees and visitors, and we encourage local governments, businesses, and universities to pursue a bicycle-friendly designation as well. So we're excited about that, and hopefully you can see some of the things we've done here when you guys can come back and see us in person. The other ones I wanted to go through quickly. The first is the South Dixie Highway US 1 lane elimination results. An update on that. You all requested a presentation from DOT on the US 1 lane elimination results for the portion just south of Okeechobee and West Palm Beach. Meetings were occurring between AFDOT and the City of West Palm Beach to work out a preferred design of the roadway. Since both parties did not reach agreement on the preferred number of lanes, the project was deleted from the TPA priority list. So at this time, we didn't have any other updates for you all to discuss. The next one is a TPA committee census. So we're requesting all committee members to complete a census on race, sex, and age to assist us in compiling that data for tracking our committee's diversity in accordance with state statute. And we have a link there, and I believe we sent out sending out an email regarding the census for you all to complete it. It really only takes a minute or so to complete, so we hope that you can do that for us. Next one is October's National Pedestrian Safety Month. There's also some FDOT Transplex web series. There's multiple webinars being hosted every Friday during the month of October related to transportation, which are great to check out. The next one, I believe, is on fiber, so I'll give you one to check out. Mobility Week is going to be between October 30th and November 6th, and you can check out more at fdot.gov/products/mobility week. There's an upcoming lane repurposing workshop by FHWA. It's going to be hosted by the TPA, and this is a workshop on Friday, November 6th. The seating is limited, and registration closes on November 2nd. So if you'd like to register for that lane repurposing workshop, you can visit our website there or at Eventbrite. There's a Florida public opinion survey for pedestrian bicycle safety that's being conducted by AFDOT. More information you can find at that link there at palmbeachtpa.org/AFDOT safety survey. There's American Walks community grants, community change grants, applications. The deadline is November 9th. More information at the americanwalks.org/community-change-grants website. And then my last slide for you. Safe Routes to School funding available, grants from Florida at srtsfl.org, and those are due December 31st. High visibility enforcement grants through AFDOT are also available until those funds are exhausted. And then our next governing board meeting is going to be held October 15th. And we do not have any November meetings for the governing board or the advisory committees. So our next meeting will be held for TAC on December 2nd. And lastly, The Safe Street Summit is going to be virtual this year. It's going to be held January 28th and 29th, so you can still sign up for that, and you can sign up at safestreetsummit.org. And that's all I have.
Okay, are there any discussion on any of the items that Andrew just presented? No. Are there any public comments on this item?
I'm sorry, my microphone was off. I don't see any public comments that are in through Zoom, and we didn't receive any through email.
Okay. So I guess we're gonna move to item 2, which are the action items. The first presenter for this is the motion to recommend approval of the local initiative program guidelines and scoring system. I'd like to invite Jason, TPA tip coordinator, to present this item, please.
Good morning, my name is Jason Price. I'm the tip coordinator. Today I'm going to be presenting the local initiatives 2021 application cycle.
Madam Chair, I'm finding it really hard to hear Jason. I don't know if he can speak up.
I can speak up a little closer to the microphone.
That's a bit better, thank you.
Is it better now? Hopefully.
A little bit.
Today I'm going to present the local initiatives, program guidelines, and scoring system. This is an action item that will require a vote to recommend approval to move to the floor. The first slide for the local initiatives is this is just an overview slide. As to begin, it's a lower cost, non-regional significant projects. That's what it's funding. It's approximately $5 million per project, and it has an annual amount of $20 million. This program will fund complete streets, transit capital projects, non-motorized projects, and freight projects. And to look at the timeline, if you were to apply and was awarded this year, your design funds would be available in 2024, and the construction funds would be available in 2026. So it's about a 5-year time frame if you were awarded funds through this grant application cycle. Now I'll go over the proposed dates for the program this year and some program changes in the following slides. The first is the program kickoff. That'll be on October 15th. That'll be next week at the TPA board meeting when they approve the program for both transportation alternatives and local initiatives. Next is the application workshop. That'll be held in a few weeks on October 27th, and that'll be both a combination of virtual and live in person, and it'll be recorded and streamed on Zoom, so you can view it after October 27th. And that'll be an opportunity to ask questions about the program, find out more information about the lab certification, and any other program questions you might have. Following that is the pre-application meeting. This is again a new component that we added last year that was fairly beneficial to all of the applicants. And the pre-application meeting is the scheduling of a one-on-one meeting between FDOT, the TPA, and the applicant, and it gives you the applicant the opportunity to ask any questions that they might have about their project or any other project that they're interested in applying for. Next, the application deadline, that's February 26, 2021 of next year. Then after the deadline passes, we'll rank the projects provided to FDOT, and the ones that are ranked the highest that are selected and approved will go to the draft priority list of projects and go to the committee and the boards for approval in July, and then also in July they'll be included in the project priority list that we'll send to FDOT. The last bullet on the slide, this is a new item that we included this year, and I reached out to those that have projects in the pipeline now. We're requesting that when you are awarded funds for a project, that you include the project with the source of funding in your capital improvement program or local program of projects no later than December 31st of 2022 in order to retain funding. And this is just to indicate support for the project and the funds used, the local funds used to implement the project. Now we'll go over the scoring changes. The scoring format this year has changed to 3 categories: what, where, and why, just to have some more semblance and organization for the scoring. And so the first category, what is being implemented, some of the changes include on the bicycle and pedestrian side, 8 to 9 foot paved paths, 4 foot unpaved paths, and also standalone ADA facilities, including pedestrian crossings, bus stops, and other kind of spot location treatments to enhance pedestrian connectivity. There's also vehicle facility changes, and we've increased the scoring for TSM components, the transportation system management, and that'll include some of the other categories that are strike through. As you see, there's expansion of fiber optic traffic signals and closed caption television camera coverage. That stuff is in line with TSM components in terms of making the transportation system more efficient. And so we've reallocated those points to a single category. Next slide. Next is the where category, and here we've made some additional changes. We removed the view perceived ratio scoring component and dedicated those points to projects that improve bicycle and pedestrian facilities in Tier 1 bicycle and pedestrian gaps. And those gaps are found in our LRTP. We have a map that indicates where those gaps are. And so we just reassign those points to that. The rationale was Ciscapacity has other funding sources that could implement projects along those lines, and so we're just redoing this component of the scoring to be more in line with our LRTP, the long range transportation plan. And further down, there's a few more changes. For sea level rise, we kind of fine-tuned the language so you can see that it's more in line with, it includes annual flooding that also happens. And lastly, we've included high crash, dark and unlit bicycle and ped locations as part of our Vision Zero action plan. So we've incorporated some more language in there to include that. And the last slide that I have for you to present is the why category, and the only change here is the FDOT implementation of state highway on state highway system with local funds. Again, this was a change just to not to incentivize using local funds on state highways, and we're trying to kind of align state funds to be used on state highways. And so we took out this category, but kept the other ones for LAP implementation and FDOT implementation. Those are all the slides I have. If there's any questions.
Are there any discussions on what Jason presented?
Madam Chair, I do have a public comment from Khurshid. I don't know if you want to do public comment first. Otherwise, I have Mo has his hand raised.
We could do Khurshid and then Mo, if that's possible.
Yes, Madam Chair. So Khurshid, I will allow you to speak. You will be limited to 3 minutes. You may need to unmute on your end.
Good morning. Thank you very much. My question is that on bicycle facility types, could there be a factor of speed and means incorporated into the points? For example, if the speed is more than 35 miles per hour on the road and it's more than 4 lanes, a separated bicycle is a huge improvement in there and should be probably much higher, awarded much higher points than a two-lane small street which has, separated bicycle. So that, I think it should be also a factor of speed and number of lanes. If you guys want to take a look at it. And secondly, if somebody can explain again, there is that capacity project improvements on the signalized intersections that does reduce the congestion, and that is being deleted under the vehicular facilities. Those are the two questions and comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comment. Mo?
Thank you. I think Khurshid touched on some of the one of the items that I want to talk about, which is the grading for the LI projects, where we strike out the capacity enhancement for vehicular traffic or generally capacity enhancement, and we are replacing it with efficiency for only freight, I believe, and maybe transit. I don't remember if you can put that on the shared view. We can probably look at it. Can you, Jason?
Yes, we'll be doing that. This is Andrew. Alyssa, could you bring that up again?
Yeah.
I think it was slide 3.
Anyway, I'll talk while she's doing that. So it seems like we are, no, not this one, the one before it, for the LI, the one before it.
Previous slide, please.
Yeah. Yeah, this one. So under vehicular facilities, we are striking out, capacity project improvements, improving congested thoroughfare intersections, and we are replacing that with project includes TSM components. I'm not sure I know what TSM stands for. Example, you are giving connected signals, cameras, vehicle sensors. Those are probably components of ITS. So that, in my mind, is very biased. Many of the projects that can improve congestion and improve efficiency for all users of the road may not include ITS and or traffic signals. So this is ITS and or components of the ITS are ways of achieving a goal. So they should not be a metric that we measure based on and grade a project. We need to look at the output. The objective is to reduce congestion, improve safety, improve efficiency. How you achieve that, it could be different methods. A method that you are citing here might be good now, but tomorrow with the changes in technology might become obsolete and does not render any benefits. So I recommend that we remove that item and replace it with simply projects improving and increasing capacity of the roadway for all users.
Okay, does anybody else have comments on what's presented?
Yes, Madam Chair, Brian Davis with his hand raised.
Okay, Brian Davis.
Thank you. I was generally troubled with this because, one, I'm relatively new, but there wasn't really any explanation other than what was just offered just as part of the presentation for why these changes were being made. And frankly, having some of the changes made, sort of on the fly here that were just presented help address some of the comments I'm about to make. But I found that there's a lot of these are easily off the shelf type data sources, which is all well and good, but sometimes the detail level of planning is what makes the difference. And I found that there are certain things that address context, and that's a real buzzword in DOT these days, is to understand where and what the improvements are and what's the level of transit relative to the road network and capacity and so forth. But there doesn't seem to be really any consideration of is an improvement near employment or commercial centers where there may be deficiencies, which may make more sense, or you get more bang for your buck. Usually there's a desire to have a greater efficiency in an improvement. This is public money after all. Also, there might be some sort of attempt made to quantify the number of persons benefited by a certain improvement, say within a quarter mile or a half mile radius. I think something like that, some sort of larger level. And then also in this day and age, I think we have to be sensitive to, there are cultural issues of transportation disadvantaged persons out there, which, in cultural movements now, like Black Lives Matter, I think those are added things that probably should be considered. Are there minority populations out there that might need more improvements? And in particular, and maybe this is because I'm coming from the county perspective, but what about the Glades area? There are municipalities out there that desperately need things. I sat on a grant committee just a few weeks ago, had a project that sat immediately outside of the city of Belle Glade, and it didn't have sidewalk connectivity, but it was supposed to be for sort of senior housing out there. And I mean, it's going to get the grant money and so forth, but it's not far from downtown Belle Glade, if you will, and yet they need a sidewalk to get there. And so little things like that make, I think, a lot of common sense are really not picked up in this. I mean, I think this is a good start, but not understanding why certain things are being made and then seeing that there could be an extra step made, I just think would improve the context, or not the context, but improve the overall presentation and what we're trying to achieve here. I mean, I understand these are smaller projects that wouldn't otherwise be picked up, but I think there could be more consideration giving to some projects that might otherwise get stuck in the criteria. Well, it's not an 8-foot, shared use path, that just because it's easily quantified, it's picked up, but the more difficult, more weighty, substantive issues are not picked up in this. And I think that's always the fine grained planning that has to be done. So with that, I will conclude.
Thank you. Does staff have a response for Mr. Davis?
Sure, this is Andrew. I can respond to that. I think what he mentioned is something that we were sort of seeing as staff as well. And I think that's why we organized the scoring this year as a what, where, and why, so we could see how the points are really being distributed towards either just putting facilities out there as the what versus a where. So getting more into what Brian mentioned, we do have things in there related to distance from a transit hub and traditionally underserved communities and median household income, and hurricane evacuation routes, and then our Vision Zero action plan, high crash corridors, and then get into the why. And the way it's broken down right now is 40 points towards a what category, so just the sheer facility you're putting out there, the where, where it's located is 60 points, and then the why of 20 points. So hopefully that provides you guys with a sort of understanding of how things are weighted in a way. When we look at other MPOs, a lot of them have gone more towards that where and putting a lot of points towards that where category. Right now we're at 60 points. Some places don't really put points towards the what. I think we've been trying to strike a balance to sort of still provide points towards the what, especially those facilities that we highly prioritize, such as a separated facility. And so that's why we still have it in there. But that's really what I have for a response for that. The other things I can touch on as well, if you'd like me to, about Mo's comments.
Yes, and then I'll circle back to what Brian said, but you can address Mo's comments.
Yes, and Mo, you brought up a good point about the vehicular facilities and trying to measure an outcome instead of the type of facility we put out there. And the reason we struck this with this capacity product improves congested thoroughfare intersections, I think we were trying to move more towards travel time reliability and trying to figure out a way to measure that instead of traditional just vehicle capacity type of metric. We discussed with staff this week about how we approach this, and we do have an alternative for you if you're willing to hear that, about how we could rephrase that line and keep it as 5 points, and then take those points from the TSM components back down to 5 points. If you'd like to hear about that one. And what we had for a idea for that, and if Alyssa, if you can put that back on the screen for that table, that instead of it saying capacity project improves congested thoroughfare intersections, maybe we could go with something that can be more easily measured, such as the language we had was, let's see here, capacity project improves travel time reliability. So if we move,
Can you say that again, Andrew? I didn't understand the last few words that you said.
yes.
Please.
So instead of where it says it's struck through for capacity product improves congested thoroughfare intersections, we could say capacity or project improves travel time reliability, and then measure travel time reliability. So if it's a segment that's been considered unreliable or an intersection based on data, and it improves that section, then it would be given 5 points.
I think that's a great idea, whether it's travel time and travel time reliability is an objective that we want to achieve. And again, as I said, there are several ways that you can achieve your goal or objective. And here we need to emphasize and score projects based on the goal and the achievement of the goals that we have, without trapping ourselves into going into the details of how you can do that by embracing and or giving more points for certain technologies or etc. that may or may not be conducive to achieving that goal. That's detail that we should not get into. We measure and we look at the objectives, and the objectives are always, I agree with you, at the end of the day, is reducing travel time and increasing the travel time reliability. So that will be a great idea if we could replace that item where we talk about TSM components with connected signals. I don't see connected signals can help with incident management, etc., but may not necessarily improve travel time and travel time reliability, etc. So I agree with that, and I would be willing to make a motion based on that.
Okay, thank you. Circling back to what Brian said about other quantitative scoring criteria, maybe we can go to the next slide. Maybe there should be some adjustments in whether it's low income neighborhoods or the Vision Zero criteria that will help aid some of that. Because I agree, maybe there's some other measurements that we can look at. Low car ownership areas, or if you're within a quarter mile to transit, those access. But seeing that this table is very built out, and it, staff has put a tremendous amount of efforts into, breaking it down to very details. If we can take a look at that and see how we can make adjustments to possibly address Brian's comment on how do we weigh lower income neighborhoods, which address the equity issue in the whole transportation system. And maybe we can allot a couple more points for them for that criteria. I don't know what your thoughts are, Andrew or Jason, on this.
Madam Chair, a question before the answer.
Sure.
This project benefits traditionally underserved communities. Wouldn't that cover all of those in general sense, all of those groups that we just discussed?
It is, but I think what Brian is trying to make his comment, if I have heard it correctly, is that maybe those points should be more weighted, for benefits to the community, especially lower income communities. Am I correct, Brian?
Yeah, that was one of the thoughts I was trying to get out there, is that to me, sometimes it's like the fact that there may or may not be an improvement in an area versus, I mean, like, you got just as much if you did a multi-purpose path versus whether or not you were doing, it was in an area that was traditionally underserved. And yeah, it was almost more of a weighting kind of issue of, should that be given more weight, or should you maybe then buttress that with additional factors that may reinforce that? Maybe not a weighting issue, but other things that are, you know, corollary or complementary to that.
Yeah, and I think it's because it's a balance within, you know, there's certain points already allotted for each one of these criteria, whether it's like 60-40 or what Andrew said earlier, that for example, that lower income on this particular screen, maybe we can look at adjusting project improves, well, they're all very important. This is very difficult to make a decision. But project improve aging infrastructure, maybe there is a balance, right? Aging infrastructure or no infrastructure. So that could be adjusted there, going down from a 5 to a 4, and then we can allot an additional point for lower income. It's just a thought. I understand it's a very challenging exercise that staff has to go through, but I acknowledge, Ryan, your comments, and I do agree. So I'm gonna, I trust staff and their, you know, their complex exercise that they went through. So I'm gonna end my discussion here. Is there anyone else that has their hands raised? Because I can't see the screen.
Yes, Madam Chair. I have John Crane, Natalie, and Jim Bell.
Okay, we'll go in
and
those.
I'm sorry, Christopher Marsh as well.
Okay, we'll go in that order. Thank you.
So John Crane first.
Thank you. Just a couple quick comments. One kind of related to the metrics. I liked the discussion about travel time reliability. A couple other metrics or that we might try to get at as we move, you know, towards measuring the mobility of the whole system is maybe a connectivity or first last mile connectivity type index that might help get at some of those gaps in the system that will, you know, get towards improving the overall mobility and might not come up in a traditional travel time index type metric. So that's just one option. I also was wondering if, I know this is probably, all these comments are going to be, you know, great comments, but we need to make a decision on this today. But maybe there could be a workshop, you know, after this for the next cycle where the TAC, you know, can bring in a discussion of the various metrics that are important to their areas, and we could maybe discuss this in a more robust fashion. Thank you.
I had Natalie Crowley next.
Okay, Natalie.
Thank you. I too share the same thoughts that have been expressed by John and some others on inserting language to include travel time reliability. I think that will add, and I think it is an important metric to include. I question where the points will, it looks like if we add those 5 points back in, I don't know where you're going to offset those points. So I'm curious to know how it's going to affect the other point scoring system. And that kind of leads to my other thought that when you were discussing and then John, and you know, in terms of time frame, because I think this is pretty, this whole scoring chart is pretty, it's very technical and it's very complicated, and I don't think it's really effective if we're you know, whittling through each point as a committee here. I think staff we need to let staff do their job, and then I think they need to, and I think that they can address it. If it needs to move forward, then I trust that staff can do that. But this is now more for a question of Andrew, that you know, what is the time frame of this? Are you able to make some tweaks and then bring it back to the board, or does this need to move forward today? Where are we at in terms of time frames? Because what I wouldn't like to see happen is basically all these revisions done by committee. I think staff, you all need to hear our comments and then make the adjustments based on the feedback. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This item would be whatever your recommendation is, would go to the board next week for approval. and then we would kick off the cycle. So this is, I guess in essence, your last, whatever you guys recommend is what we're gonna be putting to the board. And then for the discussion about,
Jump in.
going back to, with you all maybe later on, early next year to revisit this scoring, and we can discuss more in detail about how this gets changed up and spend some more time on that with the workshop with you all. A lot of this is, we just updated our long-range transportation plan, so a lot of this stuff is sort of trying to gear more and more towards that, which is why you see the tier 1 pet bike gaps, and you see a few language changes to sea level rise and Vision Zero. So we're all trying to integrate it more back into whatever is consistent with our LRTP performance measures. And so we could revisit that with you all and show you those performance measures, and also have more in detail discussion regarding that at a later date. But for the time being, yes, we would be going forward with whatever your recommendation is to work forward next week.
Okay.
So with that being said, how would you address the 5-point, if you're inserting the 5 points back into travel time reliability, Andrew, what would be the offset on that?
Sure, I actually was doing that as we speak.
Can we go back to the last slide?
You mind, if you don't mind, Alyssa, I'll share my screen. And
list the whole thing.
I think I have Excel open, so 1 second, guys. Let me share that. Okay, let me know when you guys can see that.
We can see it.
So I highlighted the ones that we would have changed, that I changed already. So we had this first one, this top one, product includes TSM components at 10 points. So if we reduce that back down to 5 points, which is basically in line with sort of the points you got last year for TSM. And then we changed this capacity product improves congested thoroughfares intersections to so delete. That one's replaced with capacity product improves travel time reliability. So that would be the language there. Oh, and that would be 5 points. It says it's.
Would not strike through, yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
Microsoft Excel online, so it's not as great.
Okay. So Margie, who's the next
So I have
person?
Jim Bell is next.
Okay, Jim Bell.
Yes, I just want to expound a little bit more on Brian's comment. I really think that there should be something in the metrics that also relates to large commercial centers or employment centers, proximity or adjacency to that. I see that the criteria kind of already addresses low income communities, but then it doesn't address one of Brian's points too about like proximity to high density areas or high population centers. I don't know if we could throw that in there. And lastly, I do really like the chair's comment about areas, being close to areas with low car ownership areas. I think that's a great criteria. If that could maybe be thrown in there. I don't know. I guess there's a lot of criteria that could be added in here, and it makes it more complicated. And like staff's done a great job with this. It's a hard thing to do. I get it. I do like some of the comments that have been made by both Brian and the chair. I just want to share, the emphasis, I think, on some of these other things. That's it.
Thank you. And maybe what we can do is make a mental note of this discussion for next year's cycle. As there's going to be changes to the program. And the next person?
Christopher Marsh.
Okay, Chris Marsh.
Good morning. My comment would be to, as we make these changes to scoring criteria, potentially look at past projects that didn't make it in previous years and see if the scoring criteria changes would have moved them up into funding eligibility. So we could look at the quality of those projects and kind of look at a real world impact to these changes.
Okay. Are there any other comments?
I have Kim Delaney as the last one.
Okay. Kim. Kim?
You will need to unmute on your end, Kim.
That's probably easier if you hear me when I have now not mute clicked. Good morning, Kim Delaney for the record from TCRPC. First, a compliment to the TPA for its leadership in developing a detailed metric to evaluate these applications. So, you know, as members on this committee, we have watched this process evolve to what has really become at a minimum, a regional best practice, but I would suggest it's beyond that. So first, compliments to the detail that's presented in the matrix. As we talk through these various criteria to staff, to Andrew, if it was possible to look at the whole list, and I know that's hard to do at this scale, that would help me better understand the relationships among the various point totals. And so that's one request as we think about shifting points around, is to be able to zoom out and get a better understanding of how many points are being allocated to transit, how many points are being allocated to the physical facilities, like, you know, the bike ped facility infrastructure. That's one request. And the second is that what is continually impressive about the way these the points are considered for these projects is the emphasis on land use. The Planning Council, of course, has been consistent over time in how important the land use transportation relationship is for both the efficiency and the effectiveness of transportation infrastructure. And so the dialogue today really speaks a lot to the land use relationship and the land use characteristics. So, you know, not necessarily for today because we have a schedule crunch and really the allocation of points as presented, I'm very comfortable. I think there's a good representation of equity considerations, which is kind of one of the strong topics today. It's at least 10% or maybe 15% of total points, which I'm comfortable with as a board member recommending. But as we zoom out and look at the holistic set of criteria, it would be helpful to be able to understand, you know, what percentage of the criteria are attributable to land use characteristics, for example, versus transit operational characteristics, which is the second category, and then the infrastructure itself. So I just make those two observations. Again, I'm comfortable actually with the criteria as presented, and not at a point where I'm ready to make a motion because I don't think we're at closure, but just wanted to offer that for the record, Andrew. I didn't know if it was possible to zoom out and look at kind of like a pie chart even to understand how different point categories are assembled with respect to the various criteria. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I like your comment, Kim. I think the pie chart and breaking it down is helpful. Maybe something like that could be done for the pre-application process. Which is, you know, it's not, we have until November, just from each one of these agency and the interests of each one of these applicants. I think that would be helpful. Are there any public comments at this time?
No, Madam Chair.
No public comments. And so I want to summarize. Thank you so much. This is I know it's a very difficult exercise, a very complex scoring criteria. I think what we have to make a decision right now is, yes, we do want to move it forward. From most discussion and the adjustment as presented here on screen, adjusting the project includes TFN components to be reduced to 5 points, and including the capacity project to improve travel time reliability of 5 points. Is there, are we at this point where we can make a motion and move forward? If we do have a motion, I'd like to entertain a motion at this time. No one? So are there further discussions that we need to have?
Move to approve. This is Mike Rumpf. Move to approve.
Second, Kim Delaney.
I'm sorry, can we clarify the motion? Move to approve the motion as presented by the staff, or to approve with the changes that's recommended on screen?
With the principal changes that are recommended.
Okay, So we have a motion to approve the scoring criteria with the changes, adjusted changes as recommended by staff, by Michael, and second by Kim. This is a
Madam
roll
Chair.
call.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Can we have a roll call, please?
So I will need you to unmute on your end. Will Hicks. Okay, Modus Alter. I'm sorry, Anna Bielowska.
Yes.
Terrence Bailey.
Yes.
Jim Bell.
Yes.
Jamie Brown.
Yes.
Natalie Crowley.
Yes.
Wen Dang.
Yes.
Brian Davis.
Yes.
Kim Delaney.
Yes.
CJ Lamb.
Yes.
Alex Hansen.
Yes.
Aaron Hoffman. And Aaron, I'm going to ask you to unmute on your end. While you're doing that, I'll keep going. Kara Irwin Ferris.
Yes.
Michael Rump.
Yes.
Meher Mansour. Christopher Marsh.
Yes.
Michael Odell.
Yes.
Richard Pereira.
Yes.
Kim Glass Castro.
Yes.
Maria Tahara.
Yes.
Kenny Wilson. Aaron, I see that you've unmuted.
Yes.
Thank you. Kenny Wilson. Kenny, are you there? Okay, and then going back, Modus Alter,
Yes.
and then Will Hicks. And I'm not sure, there's a 561 number.
Yes.
Will, is that you?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Is that a yes? Yes, we can hear you. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it passes unanimously, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next item is the information item on I-95 at Woolworth Road Project Development, PD&E study. So at this time, I'd like to invite Jeff Easley, DOT consultant. Is Jeff in virtual or?
He is virtual.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing.
Right, we're all virtual for this project, and I know Jeff is listed as the presenter. I'm gonna go over the PowerPoint. So I don't know if Margie, you can give me the control for the PowerPoint. Instead
Yes,
of
we'll
Jeff.
have staff designate control too.
Okay. Let me know. All right. So good morning. My name is Julieta Manso. I'm with Hanson Professional Services, and we're a consultant to FDOT for this project. We'll be presenting the I-95 at Woolbrook Road PD&E study, and this is a project update presentation. And with me, we have Humberto Arrieta, he's the FDOT project manager, and Jeff Easley, he's the consultant project manager for the project. Okay, so the interchange of I-95 at Woolbrook Road is located within the city of Boynton Beach in Palm Beach County. Our project limits extend along I-95 from just south to just north of Woolbrook Road, and along Woolbrook Road from Southwest 18th Street on the west to Southwest 2nd Street on the east. I-95, it's a 10-lane divided interstate within this area. And Woolbrook Road, it's a 6-lane divided roadway west of I-95, and it's a 5-lane with a 2-way left turn lane east of I-95. We also have the South Florida Rail Corridor, CSX, that runs parallel to I-95, and it runs west of the interchange. And there was a recent design build project that was completed in 2019 for this interchange, which widened Woolbrook Road over I-95 to provide one additional left turn lane over I-95 to go into the northbound and southbound I-95. The purpose for this study: address traffic spillback onto I-95, reduce congestion on I-95, and Woolbright within the interchange, improve interchange operations, and improve safety through the 2045 design year. And also the need for the project was established based on the system linkage, capacity, transportation demand, model interrelationship, and of course, safety. The existing crash analysis was conducted for this study. We look at the most recent 5-year crash history along the I-95 mainland, along I-95 ramps, and also at Woolbright Road within the project limits. Based on the results from the crash data, we determined that most of the crashes are associated with the heavy congestion along the 3 segments that we evaluated, being the rear end collisions, the most predominant type of crash along the corridor. So on this slide, we show the existing traffic conditions. On the top boxes, you can see the lane configuration at each of the intersections, which include the Southwest 8th Street intersection on the west end of the project, the southbound Rand Terminal intersections, and the northbound Rand Terminal intersections with I-95. On the aerial, we show a delay and level of service for each of these intersections. The top boxes, in this case, the green boxes represent the AM values, and the bottom boxes, which in this case are yellow, are representing the PM values. For the existing condition analysis, the level of service at the 3 intersections are level of service C in the morning and D in the afternoons. So based on the no action or the no build analysis for the 2045 year conditions, the traffic projections at these 3 intersections will deteriorate by the 2045. Providing levels of service F and E at the Southwest 8th Street intersection and E and Ds at the Rand Terminal intersections. As part of the alternative analysis evaluation, we evaluated the no action alternative, and we also look at 3 different alternatives. So for the 3 alternatives that we evaluated, we had our alternative 1, which was maximizing the existing tie diamond interchange configuration that's today at the interchange. We also looked at evaluating a diverging diamond interchange configuration. And the 3rd alternative was looking at a single point urban interchange. We presented all these 3 alternatives at our alternative public workshop, which was conducted on July 22nd. We did a virtual public workshop. And we also had a virtual open house on the project website, which is actually still available, that shows the concepts that we presented and all the alternatives. And based on the evaluation of the 3 alternatives, after the alternative public workshop, we selected a preferred alternative for the project, which was alternative 1, which consists on just maximizing the existing configuration of the interchange. So this is the preferred alternative, which is alternative 1. And it's maximizing the existing configuration of the interchange. I know it's a little hard to look at because it's really small, but we also have a concept board that we can put on display after the PowerPoint, so we can actually zoom in and look at some of the areas. But the main improvements with this alternative consist of, we're widening Woolbright Road over I-95 to provide 1 additional through lane in each direction. We're widening the bridge over the South Florida Road corridor as well, just to accommodate for the same widening. We're also widening the northbound and southbound off ramps to provide 1 additional left turn lane, making those triple lefts. Right now, we have only 2 lanes making those lefts. Also, we're making improvements at the 8th Street intersection. So improvements at 8th Street include, we're adding 1 additional westbound through lane. We're adding 1 additional left turn lane on the eastbound and westbound directions to provide dual left turn lanes at the intersection. And we're also, based on the improvements at 8th Street, we're also widening the bridge over the E4 canal, just to accommodate for that additional widening needed at the intersection. With this alternative, we're also extending the bicycle lanes from I-95 to Southwest 18th Street. The existing bike lanes now end after the bridge, over I-95. So we are extending the bicycle lanes all the way to Southwest 18th Street on the west side of the project. So this slide just shows the bridge over I-95 and the bridge over the South Florida Rail Corridor. The previous widening that was completed recently widened the bridge, both bridges on the north side. So after we completed our bridge analysis, we determined that these existing structures are in good conditions, so we can actually widen on the south side for this project, letting us keep the same structure. So you can just see on this side, we see on the right side on the screen, it's the widening that will be required for the bridge over I-95 and the bridge over the South Florida Rail Corridor. Because of the widening needed at the Southwest 8th Street intersection, to accommodate for the bicycle lanes to continue to Southwest 18th Street, we will be widening the E4 Canal Bridge. There is an existing pedestrian bridge that runs parallel to that bridge on the north side. And we will be replacing that pedestrian bridge and incorporating the sidewalk as part of the widening for this project. So you can see the improvements are on the left side of the graphic. That will be the widening requirements. The traffic analysis for the 2045 for the preferred alternative is shown on this slide. So as you can see, the proposed improvements will improve the operation at all three intersections, bringing the intersection of 8th Street to E and D, and bringing the terminal intersections with I-95 to C for the southbound terminal intersections, and C and D for the northbound terminal intersections. This picture shows the right-of-way impacts associated with the preferred alternative, and we are required to accommodate, we will have some right-of-way impacts due to the improvements on 8th Street. There is approximately 2,000 square feet of right-of-way needed at the southwest quadrant of the intersection. There are no impacts to the actual building or businesses, and there's no impacts to any of the parking at that location. Only one business property has been identified as part of the right-of-way impacts, which is the graphic that we show on the previous slide. So there's no relocations anticipated as part of this project. For the cost estimate, we have an estimated construction cost of $12 million. We identify right-of-way acquisition at $1.5 million for a total cost estimate of about $17 million for this project. So we started this project at the end of 2018. We had an agency and public kickoff meeting back in May of 2019. And as I mentioned, we had our alternatives public workshop, which was virtual in July 2020. We've met with the city of Boynton Beach twice. We met with them before the kickoff meeting. We also met with them before the alternatives public workshop to show and everything that we will have on display at the workshop. And we also met with Andrew and Nick with the TPA before the workshop to show them the alternatives and get some feedback and comments before we actually present it to the public. When we started this project, we anticipated that the class of action for the PD&E was a categorical exclusion type 2. So now that we have selected a preferred alternative and that we have evaluated all the impacts associated with the alternative, we have realized that the impacts are very minimal. So the project is being reclassified as a categorical exclusion type 1. So what this means is just that the project's still moving forward. We're still advancing this project to the design phase, but a public hearing will not be required and will allow the project to finish quicker the PD&E phase so it can move on to the next phase. So let me just, we can, if you want, Margie, we can change to the concept so we can see in more detail some of the information. The project is scheduled for design to begin early next year. Since we're not having a public hearing, we will be preparing a newsletter to mail out to all or mail out list and the community, just to let them know the project has been selected as a preferred alternative and that the project's actually going to be moving into design.
Does this conclude your presentation?
Yeah, if with that, we can open. If anybody has any questions, we can walk through the concept and look at it in a closer view.
Okay. Do we have any raised hands at this time?
I do have Alex with his hand raised, and at this time, I don't have any public comments.
Thank you so much. Alex?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, I had a few questions and comments. The first one has to do with the cross-section that was depicted. I saw that in the two different cross-sections, we were showing a 5-foot bicycle lane, but it was not a buffered bicycle lane, which my understanding is the minimum requirement for FDOT projects. I noticed that in some sections, the project had 12-foot vehicular lanes, which I think could be narrowed to 11 feet in order to, again, provide that extra space for buffering the bicycle lane. And in other sections, I noticed that there was a fairly wide median that I thought could also be narrow if the reason for not having buffer bike lanes is lack of space. So again, I think buffer bike lanes are critical, but I did not see them included here. My second issue is pedestrian safety at some of the ins and outs of some of those ramps, the crossings, the pedestrian crossings. My understanding is that you're gonna just keep those yield to pedestrian signs that are there today, which in my opinion are very unsafe. Nobody actually stops for pedestrians who wanna cross, especially rush hour. We experience that in many of the interchanges here near West Palm Beach, Okeechobee Boulevard. I've seen people waiting 5-10 minutes at rush hour to try to cross, and then they have to run because none of the vehicles are actually stopping for them. That's my second comment. The third one has to do with the evaluation matrix, which was included in the package. I did not see a slide for it in your presentation, but I noticed that one of the items there was compatibility with future I-95 widening project, which I know it's currently in the planning stages. And for this option, it said no. So this project is not compatible with that future I-95 widening project. So my question is, does it mean that then this whole proposed design would have to be changed again in order to, in future years, in order to accommodate for that I-95 widening project, which again is happening. It's ongoing right now. So those are my three, I guess, comments, questions.
Thank you. And Alex, I think you're right as with the coordination, because I remember that the managed lane, I-95 managed lane project is currently being planned at this location. I'm not sure if there's going to be an exit or an entrance, but maybe we can, the comment would be, because this is an information item, to coordinate with that team to see how we can incorporate some of that results. Alex made a comment about bike path safety, so please take that into consideration. I guess maybe one of the things is I see the barrier walls is on the outside or the inside of the bike path. So I'm not sure when DOT would ever consider changing their safety standards to include the bike path and co-locate them with the pedestrian access point. We have something very similar to this on, I believe, the Royal Park Bridge here in downtown West Palm. And you can observe that the majority of people are taking the pedestrian path because it's behind a barrier wall. So are there any other comments at this time for Juliet?
Hi, this is CJ. Again,
could not find the raise hand button again, so.
Yeah, I don't see it. So that's why I rely 100% on Margie to let me know. Thank you, CJ.
Thank you. Yeah, my question is, what are the other two alternative, and specifically was divergent diamond interchange options been evaluated? And if it is feasible, I can see the tight spacing. I mean, might make it infeasible, but I just want to hear from you. It might has the advantage to eliminate the need for hitting the land on each direction though. Thank you.
Well, let me, if Julieta, you'll let me, this is Jeff Easley. Let me go back to the comments real quickly. The first ones, the buffered bike lane is something that we did consider, and because of the widening of the bridge, and again, this alternative widens the bridge about 30 feet on the south side, and it was widened about 30 feet on the north side recently. And one of the benefits of this project is keeping the existing structure. We can maintain the existing vertical clearance over I-95 with 30 feet. Going beyond that, we're really getting into a very area that we would maybe have to replace the bridge, and that takes away the advantage of this. So that's the issues with the buffered bike lane, but we certainly will evaluate that. As far as pedestrian safety, we do realize that. We do realize that is important. That's some of the comments that we have received. And yes, we are looking at ways that we can protect the pedestrian crossing those ramps, because two of those ramps are free flow, and one is already signalized, the northbound off ramp, but the southbound on ramp, the southbound off ramp, and the northbound on ramp, they're all yield conditions that we are looking at ways that we can protect the pedestrians crossing. Now, as far as the compatibility, no, this project, if built, does not preclude the managed lane project. And I guess that metric in the evaluation was really in comparison to the other two, because based on the master plan or the very preliminary typical section through here for the managed lane project, the bridge here, the horizontal clearance underneath the northbound and southbound lanes doesn't really provide enough for the full 12-foot shoulders on the inside. So they would have to be reduced some, but that's not, it's just underneath the bridge, so that does not preclude it. And again, that's very preliminary. And when that project goes forward, that can be worked out. So no, this project would not have to be reconstructed, and it would not create a safety issue for that. And now, as far as the other alternatives, yes, we looked at it, a DDI. DDIs are famous, and they're, you see them all up and down now. But if you look at this location on the east side of this project, we have some very critical 4F properties. We have a ballpark that's on the south side, and we have a cemetery next to that. And because of the bridge going over I-95 with a DDI, in order to provide the safe separation angle at the crossover, because the wider the crossover where the two directions of traffic cross over, the wider that is, the safer it is. And in order to get the safe, you'd have to lower this design speed through here to about 30 miles per hour. And 30 miles per hour really brings it down 15 miles per hour than what it is today. Creates two bridges. There'd be two bridges that would go over I-95. And in order to avoid the Little League Park, everything would be widened to the north. And with that alternative that we have, we would have 3 residential relocations. We would have a community or a daycare center relocation. The cost would be almost more than double than what this is. The traffic service, yes, the traffic service is a little better, but this alternative provides C's and D's in 2045. And at the cost, at the minimal impacts, we have an alternative that is an alternate to taking properties and relocation. So this is why this alternative was selected. I hope that clarifies it. And because the DDI, yes, that is one that has gotten a lot more favorability. We did look at that. We actually laid out a couple different options there, but the one that would actually work creates relocations, right-of-way impacts, and the construction cost is much, much higher than what this one is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments at this time?
Madam Chair, I had Michael Rump followed by Alex Hansen.
Okay, in that order, please. Michael and then Alex.
Thank you. Just a quick question. I don't recall. Was there consideration of the stacking capacity on 8?
Michael, you broke up a little bit. If you can repeat your question, please.
Sure. Sorry, I hadn't gotten through it yet anyway. But stacking capacity, southbound 8, heading eastbound on Woolbright, that turn lane backs up and seems kind of short. Was that considered, or is there just a constraining issue at that intersection?
Well, we did look at improvements at 8th Street, and what we did not want to do is cause a lot of property right of way and impacts along 8th Street. So the improvements that we're recommending were ones that we could make to bring that level of service within a reasonable range and keep from having to reconstruct 8th or take property from the racetrack or the Burger King. And so we're able to widen, because we have right of way widening to the north and to the south along Woolbright. And that's the reason we put in an extra turn lane, we put in an extra through lane to give that southbound left turn movement more green time to clear that out and not have to require to widen 8th Street north of Woolbright. But we did look at that, and what we did not want to do is blow that whole intersection out and create all kinds of impacts there for an improvement that we're doing at the interchange. But with the improvements, that left turn should operate much, much better.
Good. Question answered. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to my previous comments and Jeff Easley's response, on the Woolbright over I-95 area, I see again, that is the cross-section that your plans are showing 12-foot vehicular lanes. So that is the one that I think and you indicated that the concern about not providing buffer bike lanes was lack of space. I think reducing the width of those lanes to 11.5 feet or 11 feet would give you that extra space for the buffer bike lane there. And the second issue, again, going back to the pedestrian crossings, my thought was just having some sort of pedestrian activated lights at those free flow ramps would address the concern there. So again, that's it.
Yeah, and I agree with the pedestrian. We are looking at what's available that we can do, because, you got to understand what FDOT, the district wants to be consistent. They want to be consistent throughout whatever they do for pedestrians at one interchange. They want to make sure they do it all. So that's what we're looking at. We're looking at what's available and what's being done, and that's something that we're continually working on. Now, through the interchange, you got to understand, and again, this is just what we evaluated and why we recommended, and just to make you understand, we have triple Fs now, and we're adding triple Fs to the ramps, and there's a certain turning radius, and we do have trucks. There are trucks that get off here. There's a lot of trucks that go to the Lowe's, that go to the Home Depot. So we have trucks that turn, and with those turning radius with triple Fs, you need that extra lane width to accept those triple Fs coming southbound to eastbound and northbound to westbound. So that's why the lanes were kept at 12 foot. So we have enough space for that throat of those triple Fs to turn and not hit the bridge. So that's the reasoning that those lanes across I-95 remain at 12 feet.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments at this time?
I do not see any other hands raised, Madam Chair.
Okay. So seeing none, thank you so much. The next item on is the Southeast Florida Transportation Council, SEFTC 2045 Regional Transportation Plan. Jessica's Jocelyn.
Hey guys, just gonna get the presentation. Everyone, when can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here today to discuss with you the recently adopted Regional Transportation Plan for Southeast Florida. I'm going to start actually kind of taking it back a bit in case some of you aren't aware. And maybe you've been asking yourself, do we plan as a region with Broward and Miami-Dade County? And the answer is yes, we do. We've actually been coordinating regionally for decades, and it was formalized as an effort in 2005 by a request from the state. And the Southeast Florida Transportation Council is made up of representation from the 3 MPOs you see here, including the TPA. It actually started under the leadership of Palm Beach back in 2005, and recently your former board member, Mayor Maria Marino, was represented on this effort, developing this plan. Each MPO does contribute equally in terms of funding the Southeast Florida Transportation Council in order to do regional planning throughout the region. This is not required by FHWA. Like I said, it was a request by the state where the 3 MPOs willingly joined together through a memorandum of understanding to do regional planning. This board is also supported by committees, some of which you actually sit on. So appreciate your efforts over the years working with this group. Now, today, as the title implied, I'm going to be focusing on one of the main products that the council creates, and that's the Regional Transportation Plan. And the Regional Transportation Plan essentially is a compilation of the 3 long-range transportation plans that each MPO do every 5 years. As a region, we've completed 3 of them to date, a 2035 plan, a 2040, and as I'm presenting today, the 2045 plan. This plan has been going on, as you see on the screen here, since early 2018. And the council adopted the plan as a successful unanimous adoption August 7th, just a couple months ago. And again, your former member, Maria Marino, was part of that adoption process. So as you can see, there were several elements in developing this regional transportation plan that I'm going to be walking you through the rest of this presentation. So first, I want to start, this is a snapshot of the adopted plan. And all past regional plans have told our Southeast Florida story, and each plan we've adopted has contributed a new way of thinking. However, this plan, we feel out of the 3 really has the most momentum behind making it an impactful long-term change for South Florida. So I'm really excited to be presenting this to you today. Yourself included, the region has been tirelessly working on how to accommodate the growth that Florida has been and plans to continue experiencing over time, and turn kind of this 20th century system that we built, because we really developed in the era of the car, into more of a 21st century system that's really aimed at accommodating, again, this growth in an urbanized area with limited availability to keep expanding the way we are. So ultimately, this plan is a call to action where our needs are shared at the local, regional, and state level to advance ultimately policies that were recommended as part of this plan that will help us meet our community's needs over time. So I wanted to share just a snapshot of the table of contents and different elements that were part of this plan development. It will probably look similar and familiar to you to the long-range transportation planning process that this TPA undertakes, again, every 5 years. Although it just is expanded to also include Broward and Miami-Dade's long-range transportation planning process elements as well. And I want to highlight, though, that a key technical activity of this regional transportation plan that really influenced each of the local LRTP developments was a scenario planning activity that you see here is section 5. And I'll go into more detail about what we did for scenario planning, but it was a data-driven process that ultimately led to these policy recommendations that I alluded to and we'll talk further about in this presentation. Now, diving into some of these steps from a technical standpoint, the first step we always do on the regional plan is define what facilities constitute regional. And for those of you on this committee that are part of this process, you know this can sometimes be the hardest effort in defining what is regional, because we truly wanted it to be objective and data-driven and replicable no matter who sat on the committee. So really tried to remove any subjectivity from this effort. Ultimately, this update, there were 5 criteria that defined a facility as being regional. The first was it had to be a principal arterial. The second, it was a planned extension of a principal arterial, so maybe not yet built, but certainly in our work programs or plans. The third was if it was part of the SIS network, and that included hubs, waterways, railways, roadway, emerging and existing. We also looked at if there were any gaps. So once all those facilities were identified, were there any gaps in the network? And there we called these connections, where we would complete the network so that it was holistic and connected. And then last this round, we added active rail lines because we recognized as a region, not all of the rail lines that we utilize to move people and goods are on the SIS network. So we wanted to make sure that those were pulled in. Now, the reason this is important, other than having some cool statistics of what's regional, is the Transportation Regional Incentive Program, which has funding associated with it, requires a facility to be on this map in order to get funding. So that's why this can sometimes be a controversial exercise. If you want funding for a facility and it's not on the network, we can try to, play with the criteria to make that happen. But I will assure you, it does always end up being very objective and data-driven. And this is just an infographic also on the screen showing the breakdown of roadway, rail, waterway, and hubs by county, including Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. So another technical exercise we went through, similar to your long-range transportation planning process, is the development of goals, objectives, and performance measures. So I do want to share that every time we do this at the regional level, we do start with your long-range transportation planning process, goals, and objectives, as well as Broward and Miami-Dade's, to kind of set a foundation and starting point for how we may want to alter them, and also reviewing if there's any conflict. I'm happy to report there's never any conflict between the goals in the region. It's just almost a wordsmithing exercise, if you will, where each county or MPO rather can word things slightly differently. But looking together this round, we ended up with 4 goals, as you see here. The first is to create a multimodal system and supporting land use. The second is related to health, environment, and safety, and making sure those components are coming into play as we develop a transportation plan. The third is the economic impacts of our transportation decisions and making sure that's sound. And then last, and of course very important, is equity and public support. So making sure we're equitable, being equitable in the decisions we make, and that the decisions we're making are supported by the public. And we find that these 4 goals collectively will help us achieve a more sustainable future and higher quality of life in the long run. I won't run through all of the objectives, but there were 16 objectives and performance measures supporting each of these goals to help guide the technical committee and decision makers through our process in terms of identifying projects, needs, and of course funded projects over time. So once we identified what we wanted to achieve in the region, we took on the activity of identifying where our barriers and challenges are today. So starting on the left, we identified that the growing population we have is certainly a challenge to overcome. Where are we going to be placing the 1,000 people per week who are moving here over the next 25 years? Where are we going to develop land, and how are we going to develop that land? So that was a challenge that we took on as a region. The second challenge we took on is doing an assessment of what are we funding versus what are the community's needs. And what we found is a barrier is because of the way our funding programs are structured, and or where there is a lack of funding, say a sales tax doesn't exist, for instance, we're seeing a mismatch of plans saying we want multimodal investments, but that the ultimate, what we fund is really highway capacity related. And specifically in the 2040 plan, we found that 14% of what the region funded was transit related, whereas 86 to 98% of what we didn't fund was transit, and those were our highest needs that we didn't fund. So we recognize that's a barrier we needed to explore further. And the last that you see here is limited access. So I don't think it's a surprise to this group that the way we've developed our system, both transportation and land use, that we're not creating as much access as we could should we look at things differently, so that other modes outside of automobile would be successful and used throughout the region. So once we identified, clearly defined the problems, we went ahead and thought about, okay, how are we going to solve this and analyze this? So we took a very data-driven focused approach. And as you can see here in the Venn diagram, the data that we assessed and explored was really based on 3 elements, looking at transit, specifically funding, and the land use. And we looked at these 3 elements and asked ourselves, okay, how do we create that seamless multimodal system to serve 7.5 million people in our future? So on the transit side of things, I wanted to quickly walk through from a technical standpoint. The technical committee had a workshop where, using the Southeast Florida regional demand model and looking at census data, we really assessed where the biggest need was for high capacity premium transit. And we, as a group, collectively with markers and maps, drew out, looking at the data, where we feel the best alignments are and routes at a scenario planning level, nothing in stone or significant detail, where those routes should go throughout the 3 counties of Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. And we only looked at levels of investment in terms of low, medium, and high. We didn't get into specifics of actual technology. Again, this was just kind of an exploratory testing process that we did. So once we figured out where we thought transit would be most successful, we asked ourselves the question of, okay, how do we increase the ridership? And for this, we took a detailed look at land use using the GIS-based software CommunityViz, where it looks at urban analytics and really exploring where we would be most successful in attracting folks onto transit using that information. And then lastly, we looked at funding, and we did a very deep dive in looking at federal, state, and local funding sources and programs, and identified where there was the most opportunity and most likelihood of trying to create flexibility in existing programs more so than we have today. And we also looked at where we could get kind of the most bang for our buck in terms of new revenue sources. So now that I walked you through kind of what we looked at a high level from a data perspective, I just wanted to walk through specifically what the scenarios were that we looked at. So the first scenario that you see on the right side of your screen at the bottom of the axis is the trend scenario. And that was really our status quo, and had our 2040 long-range transportation plan, cost feasible plan projects. So really, if we didn't do anything, we built the same way we've been building, the land use was the same as it is, and none of our funding changed, what would that look like? And we did some performance metrics evaluations for that. Then moving over to the right is scenario 2, which we call the regional transit scenario. And this scenario looked at, okay, so say we had flexibility with our funding and we could build that premium transit network that I was previously describing. What would that yield in terms of ridership and access? Now, the caveat here is in scenario 2, we did not change land use. So again, we just looked at an expanded transit system, assuming we had the money to do so. And specifically for Palm Beach County, I wanted to highlight that there was a really nice synergy in this scenario to your 561 plan. So Valerie, Andrew, and others with the TPA really closely worked with the region and were able to get an alignment there. So that's really the network for your specific county that went into that scenario. Now moving into scenario 3, we took that same transit network, but we said, hey, let's change up the land use and see what that will yield in terms of ridership. So we did that exercise. And I wanted to just note in a detail, during the workshop, the technical committee said, you know what, let's assume 75% of new growth coming to the region was placed more deliberately or intentionally around these transit corridors. What would that yield in terms of providing access to places for our communities? And then in terms of the funding adjustments that were in both scenario 2 and 3, we played around with several different funding programs in a spreadsheet and really came to the conclusion that there's probably the most opportunity that we can start with creating or asking for more flexibility, about 30 to 50% flexibility in our managed lanes, other arterial and CIS state program dollars. Again, this was just an exercise, nothing in stone, but by playing with those numbers, we found that we could loosen up about $9 billion for transit investments while still maintaining $13 billion for our very important roadways that are keeping our region moving as well. So in terms of what we found doing these exercises, it was really profound. And quite honestly, people weren't surprised. You know, we're all in the profession, and you can assume when you build a transit network, you change the land use and you have the money to build it, that yes, people ideally will use the system and we will be providing more access. But the numbers specifically between that kind of status quo, unchanged future scenario 1 to the alternative future where we changed the land use, we built the system, we had the money to do it, we're looking at about a 350% increase in ridership according to the models, which they're not perfect, but they gave us some, you know, level of certainty of what would occur. And then even more powerful than thinking about ridership, because my brain, you know, 665,000 riders doesn't mean as much to me. But what I was able to really relate to and what the region related to was the access we provided. So we went from 5% to 35% of our community having walkable access to high capacity transit from their home. And then even beyond that, we went from 10% to 50% of our community having walkable access to jobs from high capacity transit. And even beyond this, the group recognized that when we plan land use and transportation together in a multimodal way and in a safe way with great first last mile connections, the walk bike trips will increase as well. So we didn't have a model necessarily telling us that, but of course we know as professionals that that is an outcome that occurs based on other regions that have done the same. But following the scenario planning exercise and seeing those great results in a data-driven process, you know, we're not there yet. So this slide is actually showing what the 3 MPOs ultimately funded in this 2045 round of long-range transportation plans. But I will say it's not grim. I think we are really heading, and the region agrees that we're heading in the right direction. There's 18% of funding that went to transit projects throughout the 3 counties, 2% that went to systems management and operations, so kind of more of those technology and advancing in that sector, and then 4% went to complete streets, with the rest going to roadway and freight. So it certainly is going in the right direction for how we plan to move the 7.5 million people and head into a 21st century transportation system. But it really started a while back. As I was saying, you all in the region have been working towards this effort to go more multimodal. And one big step that I would be remiss to not note in this is the 750 effort we did. For those not familiar, this was done in 2013. I know some of you were very involved in the process. And our region told us all the way Indian River to Monroe that we want to be a region in motion, that 73% vote, and they want more multimodal and access and options throughout the region. So we've been saying this for a while, and even beyond earlier than 2013. And then on the right side is just a snapshot of here we are in 2020. Each of the MPOs in the region are also saying, as you know, for the TPA's standpoint, that we need options to move these 7.5 million people over time. And then beyond the 750 and your currently adopted plan, we wanted to recognize all the other great strides that the region has been making to get us to that bullseye of the CEFTEC vision of having a seamless multimodal system that is helpful for everyone that lives here and visits here. So here's just a sampling. As you see, the Palm Beach TPA 561 plan is noted there. We have the Virgin Trains West Palm Beach to Miami Brightline, as we call it, your complete streets, etc. So there's lots going on that we just want to recognize as we do this presentation about the current regional transportation plan. So now kind of as the big conclusion, if you will, of the regional transportation plan is, okay, the scenarios showed we need to change how we do business. We've known this. So we just went for it and said, okay, here are some policies that we're going to take to the Secretary of the Department of Transportation and also our state representatives to really move forward. Now's the time and we're the group to do it, we feel. So this is kind of relaying that there's 4 pieces, and we went with the puzzle theme because they all really need to work together in order to make this happen. So I'm just going to walk through each of the 4 policy areas that the region will be taking to Tallahassee. So the first policy is regional transit with supporting infrastructure is key to support growth and long-term mobility. And then we'd like to provide just a few sub-bullets for each of these policies so folks have a bit more context. So the first is the obvious, just the regionally connected high capacity transit system fundamentally changes our mobility outlook, and it is needed to move the amount of people we are anticipating. I don't think we're questioning that anymore. Now, the second bullet is equally as important. There will always be a demand for auto travel and associated congestion. So we're not suggesting everyone's going to ride a bus, congestion goes away. I mean, transit thrives in congestion. But we do still need to recognize that implementing the transit system provides us with options to serve an urbanized area. And then the last bullet actually came from a representative from Palm Beach TPA, one of your board members, and that was the recognition that that first last mile system is absolutely critical in order to make a multimodal system as optimized as possible and get people on the system safely. The second policy here is the complementary land use is essential. So we recognize as a region, you can't build the transit without the supporting land use. It doesn't work that way. They have to be happening together. And I know there's always a chicken or egg discussion, but I think we all concluded that we just need to all work together and work in parallel, really. So a transit system is not successful without these complementary land uses. And we recognize that a majority of new development over the next 25 years really should be occurring around existing and future high capacity transit routes that we're planning for as much as we're able to. And then, as I noted earlier, that these land uses complementary to transit will create those short walk bike trips and further reduce, ideally, congestion and the need for motorized transportation, which also helps our health and the environment as well. The third policy, increased flexibility within funding programs, is crucial. So here we just walk through a bit of detail on the analysis we did, recognizing that state funding programs are too restrictive, and as we know, don't allow for implementing the level of transit investments that we need. So we recognize there is some option there right now, but it's not meeting the full needs of our community. And then we wanted to recognize here that each dollar spent on transit has a greater impact on moving people, just strictly because the capacity of the buses and moving, 80 people in one vehicle versus 1 or 2 people in a car. And the last bullet here, very important, as I was mentioning before, the recognition the region made that vehicular travel is very important. And from a funding standpoint, we do have to make sure we can maintain and operate what we've built. We can't abandon the great work that's been done already to keep people moving. And the last policy, and I'm almost done, appreciate your time, is the new revenue sources are necessary. So our analysis did find, even if we were able to flex over or create flexibility in the funding we have to be more multimodal, we're still short. And it does vary depending on the county, but as a region in total, we are short. During the plan development, Broward County actually passed their surtax. That's probably going to be the only time in my career where a plan was essentially funded in the middle of the effort. But here we just, again, recognize that as a region, we do need to seek additional funding to make this whole story work and the vision complete. So with that, I just wanted to wrap up that we are creating a MoveFloridaForward.com website where we're going to be conducting outreach throughout South Florida to various organizations, working closely with Melissa Booth in terms of who we would conduct that outreach with in Palm Beach. Through this outreach effort, we will be offering the opportunity to pass resolutions of support, one of which we're bringing to your board next week. And then also for other agencies or organizations, letters of support can also be created. And this website just walks through the data-driven process in a relatable way. And we hope we can continue getting everyone on board to advance these. So with that, I do appreciate your time. I know that was pretty long at the end of your agenda, but I hope you found it informative and happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you so much. Are there any public comments at this time on this item?
No, Madam Chair.
Or any member comments?
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica. It was very informative and very detailed. And I'm glad that the goals are very, transit and multimodal friendly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I have Alex with his hand raised.
Okay, Alex Hansen.
Just one minor comment on Virgin Trains. My understanding is that they have cut off all ties with Brightline, so now the name of the service is back to Brightline. So that's just for future presentations. I think there's no more Virgin Trains.
Thank you, Alex. I caught that when I was presenting, so we will switch that. It was a leftover from a past. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much for your presentation. At this time, we have summary points from September 17th board meeting. There's no presentation on this. Yeah.
No. For item 4A and 4B, there's no presentation, but staff is available to answer any questions.
Yeah. Are there any questions for staff at this time? I don't see raised hands. Alex?
Madam Chair.
Sorry. It just I noticed that there's a reference to twice on the vote by the TPA board. There's nearing is identified as twice, so I think that is a typo in all the items. I saw that nearing was identified as twice. I'm not sure if one of the second ones should actually say Peduzzi instead of nearing. So
I will review that and we'll correct that. Thank you for pointing that out.
All right, great, thank you. So our next TAC meeting is scheduled for December. As a reminder, there's no meetings in November. At this time, the TPA intends to conduct our December advisory meeting board in person, but this may change if the governor extends permission to conduct virtual meetings. Thank you for your patience with us as we conduct this virtual meeting today. At this time, meetings adjourned.
I'm sorry, I do have that Mo has his hand raised.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Bye-bye.
Going back, Mo.
I just wanted to share with you some of our observations about the impact of COVID-19 on traffic. So I do share screen here, I think, and do this and share. You see my screen, right?
Yes, we see your screen, yes.
Okay, so what I wanted to share with you is that we looked at the impact on crash data as well. We have been telling you about how much traffic volumes were reduced throughout those months, but we did look at the crash experience as well. And as you can see in April, between April 2020, 2019, 18, 17, 16, and 15, the bar chart as well as the table here show that while the volumes dropped by 44%, crashes dropped by 59%. And if you look at the numbers in the table, you can see that the injury numbers dropped drastically. The injuries in 2020 were 104, whereby the rest of the years between 2015 and 2019, it ranged between 230 and 317. Scrolling down to the month of May, again, crashes dropped here by 37% when traffic volumes dropped by 30%. And you can again see that the number of injuries have been significantly reduced as well. And then we go to June. I know you guys are now bored and tired. You want to adjourn, but bear with me. That June, again, crashes dropped by 27%, while traffic volumes dropped by 15%. And again, injuries have also significantly dropped. One more, and I know if I can do this. Let me do this. I want to show this graph as well. This graph kind of summarizes what I went through. As you can see, the first columns on the left are for 2019 and 2020.
Mo, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think your screen that you shared is only one window. So if you have another screen you'd like to share, you have to reshare it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, so let me go back. What's this?
And as Mo is sharing, reminder, December's meeting is going to be in person. So please allow you extra time to get to downtown West Palm and park.
Madam Chair, I do have that John Crane raised his hand as well.
Okay, so while Mo is sharing, John.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Mo, I just was hoping that, I want to get a copy of that when you're done, but I'd like to know also what the traffic was during those months for the 2018 and 19, because it looked like crashes were going down there too. So I want to make sure that the relationship is not strictly, is it just strictly traffic related, or is there maybe some other stuff going on too that we're doing well at?
All right, we'll do. And it seems like I'm trying to reshare, and for some reason that one is not coming.
We saw it's a graph with the.
Yeah, that's fine. It doesn't want to. Can you see a graph now?
It's loading, so we're waiting for it to load.
All right, let's skip that. It's technology. I may not be as good.
Maybe, maybe you can
Maybe
share it
next time.
with the TPA and then, yeah, absolutely. I think this is really, really helpful information, you know, but maybe if you can share it with with Margie and we can all get a copy of it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, great. So meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.